Okay, so here's my second talk on spreadsheets. All right, we'll just continue with the basic of spreadsheets. And what I'm going to examine in this next little talk here is really functions. All right, I have a project for you here again, of course, so you get lots of hands-on exercises here with spreadsheets. So spreadsheets come with all these great built-in functions, and we always talk about, in some of the other spreadsheet, more in-depth data modeling classes, the 5 aggregate functions. And you think about when we have data, usually what we want to do with it is we want to find, we might want to look for the average. That's an aggregate function. We might want to look for the total or the sum. That's an aggregate function. We look for the maximum value. That's aggregate. And here's in this particular slide, you'll see they're figuring out the maximum. We also look for the minimum. And then the fifth one is the count, or another term for thinking of count is how many numbers do I have here? How many values do I have? All right, and that's how we, those are aggregate functions, and we got all sorts of other great functions. Another function that I'll introduce and I'll actually have you work with in this particular assignment is the PMT function, which is the payment function for compound interest. Great life lesson there. All right, so here we're back to our same example we've been following, and again, check your textbook out because these slides are in your textbook and you can find this particular table in there. But here we're going to take now and kind of, we have this table we've created up at the top, and then underneath it here we're going to take the table and kind of come up with some aggregate statistics here. All right, so and the two they're looking for is what's the average, or what's the maximum, and what's the average. So the maximum distance here is going to be 19,000, and the average is about 15,000. The body length, again, we got maximum and we have average, and then over here the flying score, kind of the same thing. All right, so what we can do is we could say, and it shows it up here, to figure out the maximum, we say it's a formula. We start with equals, and whatever the function name is. This one's max, and then we use the syntax is important, open parentheses, and then we put a range of cells. So we say all the cells that start at J2 and put a full colon between it and go on to J17, and then we end up with the parentheses. Okay, and it's all these modern tools really help you block that and have great visuals with that. All right, so now we got some statistics from our study we're doing on this particular group of birds. All right, another really powerful tool, and we're not going to cover much of it here other than to speak about it, is when we start looking at data, there's a whole branch of computer science involved with data visualization, where you actually take numbers and you find a way to display them graphically. Sometimes we make better sense out of that as human beings. We can start discovering trends, and we'll see those as charts. And we've taken a chart of, here's their flying score. We can kind of take a chart and put it together, and it's going to give us new forms of data. All right, and I believe this is just a scatter plot here of the flying score. All right, and here's kind of more of a format or a final formatted chart displaying that in a graphical way, and you get a totally different impression of the data here when it's graphically displayed versus just a bunch of numbers out there. And you'll see different trends that way. It's helpful. There's lots of other, kind of daily spreadsheets. Gosh, we have lots of, I know in my family, we have lots of spreadsheets around our house that I use, whether it be for, doing our taxes, kind of make a little summary of some expenses. Sometimes we have I know we have an address book around here. I always have a hard time finding it, but we maintain a little address book somewhere and that's electronically. Use that as a spreadsheet. But there's all sorts of things that we can do with that. I think my bank account, if I pay bills online, any bills I pay online, I can actually export all my expenses into a spreadsheet, which might be a nice helpful household tool if you're trying to do a little budgeting. All right, we kind of used a spreadsheet already. We used a table to create a calendar in one of our exercises involving HTML, but there's no reason you couldn't create a little calendar like this. Use a spreadsheet as a table to display, maybe your semesterly calendar here, and I think that's what this particular figure out of your textbook looks like. All right, here's a discount table that maybe a store or a sales firm might be using, and you look at some of the criteria here and kind of work through it, and there's, I think, some good examples in your textbook with this as well. and come up with some sort of spreadsheet. And you look in this particular example here, we're using mixed references. Remember, we got absolute references and relative references. Well, here's an example of mixed references, and we have, you know, whatever computation we need to have done kind of automated for us. All right. The exercise I'm going to assign to you is one that's a little more complex. It has to do with compound interest. And all of us are subjected to paying compound interest at some point in our life here. I'll give you some examples. We have a mortgage on our house, and we make monthly payments. Most mortgages on houses are 30 years, and ours is 30 years. Some are 20, 15. You see the opportunity to refinance at a lower interest rate. You know, that's a variable. So we got the amount we borrow, we have the interest rate of our loan, and then the term. You know, those are kind of three variables when we start looking at compound interest, and we can kind of use a function to come up with, you know, take those three variables in and actually come up with a monthly payment. So my payment is the same on my mortgage every month until it's paid off. Now, a lot of you might have student loans. That's kind of an unfortunate fact of being a student in the 21st century. As you walk out of school, usually with some loans that you need to repay. You might have a car loan. You might have a mortgage. You have all sorts of things that we make payments on. And it's really important to, if you are going to refinance, or if you're going to borrow money for that matter, to look at more than just like, well, how much is my monthly payment going to be? Isn't that what all of us really want to know? But, you know, I think it's insightful to look at, okay, how much am I actually paying in interest along with that? And using this PMT function, I think it's really helpful. So there's an example here. In fact, that's you start doing analysis work on it, and you really, just encourage you to learn this stuff, because it's really an important life tool. You know, if you master some of these little exercises we're doing here, and all of a sudden you become a more knowledgeable consumer. And I'll tell you what, compound interest is a powerful, powerful force if you want to start looking at saving money at age 20 in your 20s versus in your 50s, and what that does for you in the long run, how much money makes more money that way. And it's compound interest. All right, enough of my lecture about that. Here's paying off a loan here. Here's a loan. You've been offered 5% on it. And what we do is create a kind of a little table here. If I borrow $1,000, way to read this here, down this particular column B, it's looking at the amount that I borrow, and over here on row 2, it's how many payments am I going to make. All right, and maybe they're monthly payments, and so if I have a loan for $1,000 for 6 months at 5% interest, here are my payments on this. Okay, I believe that's correct, or is it a yearly amount? Not sure. I have to look at this exercise a little more carefully, but the three variables are there, right? We got the amount of time that it's going to take us to pay it off. We got the principal is the amount that we are borrowing, and then the third variable is our interest rate. All right, and there's a big difference if you're paying 5% interest as opposed to 10% interest, and the overall cost of your loan. All right, so let's go down next slide here. So we used a PMT function. In a PMT function, we started with an equal sign, of course, and PMT, and here's our three variables. We have our interest rate, our number of payments. All right, now notice it's not number of years, it's number of payments. And then our present value, or the amount of our loan. Okay, that's our principal. You know that if the result is negative, the payment is a cost to you. All right, and it uses conditional formatting. I'm not going to get into conditional formatting. That could be a complex subject that I want to cover in this kind of introductory portion of the course. But you know, you can do all sorts of stuff with conditional formatting. But these are the three. This area right here. Whoops. These three variables are really important to identify those and then place them in the right place. All right. So here's an example actually where you're using conditional formatting. I don't really want to get into it, but let me stay on this slide for just a minute here. So you're gonna, and I'll help you out with the formula on this, but you're gonna be asked to do an exercise here where you're comparing maybe some different loan rates and different principal amounts, and then kind of figure out what your monthly payment is. All right.